Hi everyone, I'm Chen. 大家好，我是崔晨 and this is A Day in Beijing. This is the last episode of Why the Great Wall Exists. In the first episode of the Great Wall series, we talked about how the Great Wall is never just one structure. It's 2,000 years of different construction, defense, and politics. We told the story through the people, and now this episode is about what survived and what the Great Wall means now to us, to Chinese people in this day and age, and which section is right for you to visit. Okay, quick thing before we start. If this is your first time hearing A Day in Beijing, hit follow so you don't miss the rest of the series. And if you've been listening, thank you so much. Feel free to share it with family and friends if you think it's appropriate. But seriously, it makes a huge difference for me. Thank you. Without further ado, let's dive right into this episode. The defense mentality. My dad is a retired history teacher. He spent his early 20s and 30s teaching students and studying the Great Wall. And one of the things he taught me is this. To understand the wall, you need to understand the mentality that built it. You probably remember Han Chinese, which is the majority ethnicity group in China. Han Chinese civilization is fundamentally defense-led. For 5,000 years, the priority has always been protecting what we have, protecting the land, the culture, the food supplies, protect the way of life, not expanding, not conquering new territories. That was never in our identity, in our culture, and in our history. It has always about defend and protect what we have. The Great Wall is the biggest physical expression of that mentality on Earth. And my dad showed me something in his research that makes this really clear. If you look at which dynasties built the wall and which didn't, there is a pattern. When a Han Chinese dynasty felt threatened, they started building the Great Wall. You remember the Qin dynasty. The Qin connected everything into one line because the northern nomads were raiding constantly. The Han extended it to protect the Silk Road. The Ming spent 276 years rebuilding it because of the Mongolians were at the doorsteps and the capital was right on the frontier. And you probably remember all the stories from the episode 1 on the Great Wall, so I won't repeat myself. But just remember this. Whenever Chinese feel vulnerable and under attack, what they had always done in history was build a wall and defend themselves. The wall stopped being a border because both sides became one family. The conquerors and the conquered merged. This is how Beijing is also a melting pot, another thing we'll talk about in the later episode. And here's when it gets personal. I'm half Hui and half Manchurian. My dad is Manchurian, the same people who came through the wall. My mom is Hui, which is Muslims in China, and that means our ancestors most likely came from the Silk Road. However, on either side of the grandparents, there were also Han. And that is a nutshell of Beijing, of northern China, and most of China. How we united all the differences, all the diversities, and become one big family. How they actually built the Great Wall. Before I walk you through section by section of the Great Wall where to visit, I want to spend a few minutes on the engineering side of things, because I think this is where the Great Wall stops being a history story and start being genuinely mind-blowing. The wall stretches roughly for 8,850 kilometers of Ming construction alone. And the builders couldn't use the same materials every single time, obviously. The landscape kept changing under their feet. In the mountains, they used local stones and granite. Heavy, durable, right there. However, when they were in the flat plains, where there was no stones, they used layers of soil packed between wooden frames and pounded down. That's why most of the early dynasty walls have eroded to almost nothing. And in the desert section, sand and gravel, sometimes reinforced with branches of local trees just to hold it together. But the Ming Dynasty, the ones near Beijing that you probably gonna visit, they are slightly different. Fired bricks and cut stones over rammed earth cores. And the mortar holding it together is where it gets interesting. They used sticky rice. Yes, you heard it right. They used rice. They mixed sticky rice flour with lime to create a binding agent. And this isn't folklore. Scientists have tested it. The rice lime mortar is stronger than pure lime mortar and is even comparable to some modern cement. The rice starch fills the microscopic gaps that the lime cannot reach alone. That's why Ming section are still standing after 600 years when everything before them crumbled. And the workers carved their name into every single brick. If a section cracked 10 years later, they could be traced by the brick to the person who made it. Every brick had an owner. That's quality control built into the material itself. Those names sometimes are still readable nowadays. So when you visit, look closely at the bricks. You might be able to read someone's signature from the 1400s. The width of the Ming Wall was 5 to 8 meters, and that was deliberate. Why enough for troops, horses, and supply cars to move along the top? The wall wasn't just a barrier, it was a highway that we talked about in episode 1, the Great Wall series. And that's why it needed to be wide enough to carry supplies. Just like the Forbidden City, every decision was a deliberate choice. What the Great Wall means today. After the Qing Dynasty, the wall crumbled for 300 years. Farmers took the bricks, sections vanished. Then in 1984, the government realized how important this site is for our cultural identity, and the wall was reborn again, not as defense, but as cultural identity, national pride, what it means to be Chinese. But there's a tension. Some restored sections look too new, too perfect, too polished, more like a film set, more than a 600 years old fortress. And then in 2023, construction workers widened a gap in the wall for the purpose of some sort of modern construction, and they caused irreversible damage. The balance between keeping it standing and keeping it real, that argument isn't settled yet. And then there's a newest chapter. Young Beijingers have a phrase, 靠长城,吃长城. If you grow up by the wall, you're probably going to eat off the wall. The wall has become a lifestyle and economy and a work location for most people living around it. There is a very famous and very established hotel called Commune by the Great Wall. Won the top prize as a Venice architecture. First Chinese project to ever receive that honor. 12 Asian architects, 36 villas built into the hillside. That project opened the door. Now the mountains around the wall are dotted with boutique hotels, chic Airbnbs, and coffees that mostly are independent owned. And to avoid, people can just develop the Great Wall in any single way that they wanted, the government put in strict regulation and policies to make sure any further development and constructions cannot damage the wall and the surrounding environment anymore. And that's why all the entertainment establishments around the world, nowadays, if you go, you still sense that intense energy from the Chinese community, from the Chinese traditions. And that's what makes them stand out. If you want more details of where to go exactly, come to my Instagram and check it out at A Day in Beijing. I will do a series of places to check out around the world. Which section to visit? Okay, now we finally get to the fun part. Over 20 sections near Beijing, completely different experiences. You have to know which section are for what type of demographic and target audience so that you can have the best experience of your day. And here's something most travel content won't tell you. The sections international tourists go to, Badaling, Mutianyu, are not the sections Chinese people go to really. I mean, don't get me wrong, Badaling and Mutianyu, they are amazing sections of the wall. And when you go there, you're going to see lots of, Chinese people, local people having the best time in their life there as well. What am I trying to say here is there are more sections that you probably know. And because of they're not viral on social media, doesn't mean they're not good. Okay, now I'm going to go through sections by sections and calling out what are the unique selling points, and you can decide which one is the best for you to go. First of all, definitely Badaling, the one everyone goes to. Over 10 million visitors a year. Young Beijingers say only, the tourists and the foreigners will go. But there is one thing I absolutely love and adore them for this, because if you need a wheelchair access, this is a great option. And also, they have night tour. 2026 season starts from April the 30th to the October 6th. And I'm telling you this, in the evening, it's genuinely worth going, especially in the summer. Beijing gets so hot, it can go up to 40 degrees, and there's no shades on the wall. So if you're interested in a night climb on the wall, definitely this would be your choice. Zhuyongguan, the one nobody talks about, and the one that matters the most. If Badaling was the lookout point, the outer wall point, then Zhuyongguan was the inner wall, the brain, the base, the military compound center, the last line of the defense in the mountain pass between the grasslands and Beijing. And that's why Zhuyongguan is so important. It was restored in 1998 on the original foundations. And I know you probably will say it looked too polished for your liking, too new for your liking. But if you want to climb the most important military base ever existed around Beijing, Zhuyongguan would be your choice. Because of it has been restored recently, that means you will climb a lot of stairs. I mean, when I say a lot, I mean a lot. And it is still extremely physical, even it's been restored to, its newest condition. My uncle has worked here in his entire career. And what he told me about this section of the Great Wall is there is a watchtower that dates back to the Yuan dynasty, older than the Ming Wall around it. And inside of the watchtower, there is Buddhist script carved in 8 different languages, 2 of them which are now extinct. And Jingguan is not even that far from Beijing. If you just get a Didi, which is a Uber in China, 1 hour and a half, 2 hours with traffic, you would normally get there. And Jingguan is in Changping suburb, where my mom and my mom's family come from. So if you go into the town or surrounding area, go have a farm stay, enjoy their local cuisine. They make amazing Muslim food. And because it's in a really pretty scenic suburb, you will feel like you're in the wild, in the nature. So you're not only seeing the Great Wall, you're also seeing how other people, how real people live outside of the city center. Mutianyu, the section every blog recommends. Cable car up and toboggan down, 23 watchtowers, and I'll be honest, I think it's slightly overrated, and I know it's a hot take. People probably gonna think it's the best section of the wall, especially on social media. All the TikTokers are rating this wall so high. The marketing to the international visitors has been so effective that it sometimes feels more like a theme park nowadays than the actual historical fortress. And don't let the cable car fool you. Once you're up there, sections they do get really deep. But don't get me wrong, it's still fantastic. If you want better facilities and fewer crowds, it does the job. But if you're willing to go further, there are sections that give you something Mutianyu can't. The feeling you're standing on something ancient. But all in all, Mutianyu is still a good choice if you want non-restored, non-polished version of the Great Wall. So if you want to go to Mutianyu, still go. Don't let me stop you. Now we got Huanghuacheng, my childhood favorite section. It's known also as the Water Great Wall. Part of the construction is submerged in a reservoir. We used to go on family hikes in the summer, and back then there was no tourist infrastructures, no cafes, just a wild wall on the ridge, and my dad saying, let's climb. And nowadays it has changed so much. There's a cafe called The Verse, floor to ceiling windows facing unrestored wild wall. Motorcycle riders on the terrace from where my dad and I used to scramble up broken bricks. You can now order a latte and look at the same view. So yeah, completely different vibe than before, but you will have the equal amount of fun. Jinshanling. This is a photographer's dream. 130 kilometers out, 67 watchtowers, half restored, half wild, the postcard shot. But it does require a certain level of fitness and planning. But if you want to take really amazing shots, this would be your spot. Gubei Shuizhen, which I highly recommend. Around this section of the Great Wall, they developed and restored a very ancient, very Chinese, very quaint little town around it. It is far from Beijing center. It can be 3 to 4 hours drive, but if you want to make a day trip, I would highly recommend go there. Gubei Shuizhen. You pick a hotel or Airbnb, stay the night, and in the daytime you can climb some section of the wall, and evening you can do the other half. It will not disappoint you. It is absolutely magical. I know I'm biased because this is my favorite section, and I'm hoping once you go there it becomes your favorite section as well. The last but not the least, Jiankou, is not restored in any way, is crumbling and very dangerous. people do go there and challenge themselves, and this is labeled as the stereotype of wild war. But I really would say do not go along, because as a born and raised local Beijingers, every single summer we hear horrible incidents happens at this section. But again, if you're just really up challenging yourself and have all the protection, regulations, policies around you all set up, why don't you? But just be aware, this is very dangerous and also very fun if you know how to conquer this section. And then a surprise bonus. The wall you can see without leaving the central Beijing. The Ming Great Wall was left inside of Beijing, and a preserved section of this Ming city wall that once enclosed all of Beijing now is still standing. It's not that far from Tiananmen Square actually. Most of it was demolished, just through time and lootings and invasions. The government didn't have the time and energy to protect it, but now it sits right next to the second run, and it even survived the Cultural Revolution. It's some sort of miracle that this section of the city Ming Wall is standing here nowadays in the city of Beijing, which I highly, highly, highly recommend to go. Because no matter where you're staying, it cannot be that far from this part, and I think it's only 10 or 20 yuan per person to go in, and there's a quaint cafe on the top of the Great Wall. What I love about this place is once you're on that city wall, there's a museum that you can go in, but also just look at the view. One side, you can see the ancient side of Beijing of China, and the other side, you can see the CBD, the second run. The contrast is absolutely out of this world and is so quiet. Again, I will drop the details in the description and on my Instagram. So if you're interested, come and check it out. The Great Wall was built by civilization that spent 5,000 years learning to protect what it had. And when the people on both sides finally became one big happy family, the wall became something else. Not a defense, not a ruin, a place where the past and the present sit next to each other. And that's a wrap on our 2 episodes, the Great Wall series. And next up, the Summer Palace, Yiheyuan, which is still the largest and the best preserved imperial garden in the whole of China. But here's why it matters for this story. If the Forbidden City was where the court had to be, the Summer Palace was where the court actually wanted to be every year. If you know someone who's planning a trip to Beijing, to China, or if you know someone who would simply find this topic interesting, send my podcast to them. That will do us endless wonders. Word of mouth is how an independent podcast like mine would grow. Drop a comment on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcast. I want to know your thoughts and what you want to hear later on, and for example, which section of the Great Wall you're going to visit. If you haven't already, hit follow and tap that bell button so you never miss an episode. New episodes every Wednesday. If you also have a story to tell about Beijing, about China, let me know. Join me on this podcast. This is A Day in Beijing. Thanks everyone. I'll see you in the next episode.